Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bank to the Future Live. I am here today with our special guest, which is Greg Simon from Loyyal. And I'll give you a quick intro to how we first crossed paths and the new pitch that has been launched on Bank to the Future for their pre-Series B after making a really special announcement that has been many years in the making. So we're really excited to cover that. As usual, remember, if you've got questions, please do ask those in the live chat. We've got our moderator, Irvin, here today. Famida is down with a cold and was coughing like crazy, so Irvin's stepping in. And he'll be picking out your questions in the live chat and asking them of Greg and myself. And there's a few ways in which you can do that. If everything's working as it should be, we'll be live on YouTube, on the Bank to the Future YouTube channel. Or Twitter on our Bank to the Future handle. If you use the hashtag BFLive, then we'll try and search out your questions. We should also be live on Facebook, but the crypto community doesn't tend to hang out there as much. And also on Telegram. We created our Telegram during our Bank to the Future token sale. So the handle is @BF_token. If it's your first time joining us at BF Live, you'll know that I often talk about all things crypto, Bitcoin, economics, banking, and everything that's happening out there in the world related to this. But this show is just for our investors and those engaging in the Bank to the Future community to find out about our roadmap, upcoming things, new pitches, our new secondary market, and really just get your questions answered, just dedicated to discussing either the BnkToTheFuture.com primary markets, new offerings like Greg is launching with Loyyal, or some of our secondary market listings with some of the largest companies in crypto, where you can buy and sell shares through our SPV structures. Or maybe you're a Bank to the Future wallet holder and you're looking at purchasing security tokens, or you're a Bank to the Future token holder that gets priority access to all deals and discounted trading fees when using our secondary market. Or maybe you're part of our new Bank to the Future exchange for security tokens and other parts of the ecosystem. So here's where you can get your questions answered. We'll try and pick them out. If you're watching the recording, please just leave some comments in the recording and we'll pick them out next week and cover different things and different topics. So that's my intro. We're now going to hand over and introduce our guest this week, which is a new pitch that's actually launched. So Greg is actually a pretty old Bitcoiner. He's been around the scene. He's been around for quite a while. He's got many crypto war chest stories. But also he's been working on Loyyal, which was a company that launched in 2014. We were one of the seed investors. We've done 2 rounds at Bank to the Future. And I remember when he first started, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it was at a time when, everyone was really talking about Bitcoin, and then it started to actually, people started to use the word blockchain a bit more, and all the institutions and corporates started to really get involved in the applications of blockchain. And at that time, it was really, the Bitcoin community was just a very kind of a dirty word by the corporates at the time. And then suddenly around about 2014, 15, there was a real shift where every company wanted to be involved in the blockchain space. And if I remember the original idea, but as you said, Greg will correct me if I'm wrong, was just this concept of whether you could take loyalty points. So if you're staying at, I'm in the Langham Hotel at the moment between transit, and when I pay, I get loyalty points for being a loyal customer. And then I'm about to get on Emirates Airlines, and I get some air miles. But wouldn't it be great if that could have been tokenized and you could actually take the points that you don't want and maybe trade them for some other points, and maybe digitizing these loyalty schemes could be something that the industry moves towards. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it worked out or what the end result of that was, but today we're going to get an update from Greg around those original visions, the where the company's evolved, where the industry's at today, and then also share some of the major contracts that Loyyal is currently working in. I know that they've just announced more publicly, they've been working on it for years, Emirates Airlines. And actually, Loyyal has been one of the most frustrating deals for us, because Greg is actually really good at investor relations, but because he's dealing with so many large companies that are entering this space, they're always under NDA. So he's always wanting to share this information, but we haven't been able to share it because we don't want to screw up the deal. But finally, we've got a few deals that we can actually share here today. So let's rewind that right to the beginning. So welcome to the show, Greg Simon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Simon. Yes, I can't express how delighted I am to finally be able to talk about at least one of the major enterprise customers that we are dealing with, and it is Emirates for sure. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I am an old hand in Bitcoin/blockchain. It seems like a million years ago, 2013, it was so different back then. I got into Bitcoin originally. I was formerly in investment banking, and I left my investment banking career. Pretty common story for an early adopter, out of disillusionment from the banking system, the central banking system. And someone introduced Bitcoin to me, and I was formerly a gold bug, not so much anymore, but my initial thought was, oh, how silly would this digital currency be, because I can't hold it or touch it or put it in my closet or whatever. As non-technical people approach it, and then I started to look at distributed ledger, distributed consensus, and I'm a former CPA, so the concept of a ledger is something I'm familiar with. And then all of these lights started to click, and I equate that moment of understanding how this is, without a doubt, the most transformational invention of our lifetimes, and I believe the impact will exceed that of the internet, because more along the lines of electricity and how that impacted human society. I equate it with something similar to that scene in The Matrix where Neo has the thing pulled out of his head and he wakes up and he sees reality. I got so excited, and that excitement has never diminished whatsoever, just continues to go up. And I couldn't stop talking about Bitcoin on Facebook and Twitter and friends. And as you said back then, it was a taboo subject. And I was actually unfriended by people I knew in the banking system because they didn't want anything Bitcoin associated with them on Facebook. And so I did those early years. It was a ton of fun. And then after about a year and a half or so, I thought, okay, how can I really contribute to getting blockchain distributed out into the world beyond just the early adopters? And one of the ideas I wanted to get involved with is corporate adoption. And corporate adoption of blockchain, but in a way different than using it as a replacement of a fiat currency. And so I just basically did a search. I thought, okay, this is the pre-smart contract days. So I thought, okay, what does blockchain do for us? Well, it allows us to move digital value faster, safer, cheaper. Okay, so let's find a big pool of digital value out there and see how difficult it is to move it around. And to my surprise, the loyalty industry is actually massive. Most people aren't aware, I wasn't aware, that there's over $120 billion of loyalty and rewards points issued globally every year. And these are effectively illiquid private currencies. And I saw that and I thought, oh my God, like my loyalty programs are horribly difficult to use. And then it became apparent to me, this is actually the killer application of blockchain. It is effectively a private currency industry where they're siloed and very difficult to use. And that to me seems like the intention of the invention of blockchain or Bitcoin. And interestingly enough, I subsequently realized that Satoshi invented the first distributed autonomous loyalty and rewards program in Bitcoin. It is the original use case of blockchain. When you consider in the Bitcoin blockchain, miners are incentivized to verify transactions by receiving a reward, and they remain loyal to the community because that reward can only be spent within that community of users. So it actually is the longest proven use case of blockchain. We're just modifying it slightly to get it out into the corporate world where enterprise users can adopt it in a way that is compliant with the way they have to use it. And that's how we got started. That was 2014, as you said. Yeah. I can't hear your sound.
I muted myself.
Okay,
Sorry.
there we go. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's really interesting because I do remember in the early days there was always this when corporations started to enter the crypto space or the blockchain space, they almost tried to replace the word Bitcoin with blockchain.
Yeah.
And you know, everyone was there was a whole phase where Bitcoin was really out of fashion and everyone was talking blockchain. And there was those moments when lawmakers, you know, when crypto was a bit too early for lawmakers to, you know, they could have had a major impact on Bitcoin and the crypto industry back then. It's kind of reached a stage right now where it's bigger than a country and these things right now. But back then it was very fragile and it was very volatile. Yeah. And one of the, and by volatile I don't mean price, I mean just the industry succeeding. Yeah. And one of the defenses against just an outright ban of our industry and getting rid of this and squashing it before it got too big was the fact that everyone had these things that were kind of like virtual currencies. And, you know, they had Amazon reward points and these different things that if you worded the legalities of banning this in the wrong way, then you'd suddenly get these large corporations lobbying. How does that affect our point scheme? How does that affect our virtual, thing? And it was one of the really early defenses where large corporations were actually ensuring that something silly doesn't happen with laws that try to stamp out our industry, but inadvertently ended up affecting their loyalty scheme. So the industry actually does have a lot to thank for for this industry. I don't know if you experienced any of that.
Absolutely. I mean, there is definitely truth to that. Actually, I recall when the New York Bit license came out, and there's if you read through it, there's an actual line in there that exempts loyalty and rewards programs from the definition of virtual currency. And like you said, that was probably lobbied on by the industry to have that put in there, because the line can be difficult to see. What is the difference between a privately issued corporate currency called the loyalty program and a privately issued currency called Bitcoin? It's kind of hard to distinguish between the two if you really take a close look at it. There are some differences, but from the large part, they look very similar in terms of not being a fiat currency. And I think you're right. I think that did help mute some of the early objections, particularly when you see how that gap has been bridged between public chains, which for whatever reason right now, I mean, there's some legal and regulatory reasons, the corporate world is just not ready to adopt for ongoing production use. And the permission and private chain world that has been built up to bridge that gap currently. And that has also helped quite a bit, because now, for example, Loyyal operates on Hyperledger Fabric, which is a private permissioned DLT built specifically to eliminate some of those concerns that corporate users have with public chains. And I was a compliance officer for part of my previous career in investment banking, and I unfortunately saw very early on that compliance officers will have a very difficult time approving the use of public chains in the current environment. And so that private permission chain bridge has really allowed the corporate users to take a closer look at it with less fear. And that also then has allowed, since there's a connection back to the public chain world, for them to look at that with less fear, because there's an incremental transition all the way back to the public chains. And I think it also has helped with the Bitcoin name itself. It's not as taboo as it was a few years ago. We work with large corporations that obviously have loyalty and rewards programs. And in the 5 years, I can't believe it's been that long, that we've been working secretly with almost every major company in the world you can think of that has a loyalty and rewards program. We have some dialogue with. And it's been interesting to see the transition of their opinion over those years. For example, I can think of one bank in the Asia Pac region 2 years ago, was it 3 years ago maybe, it visited us when we were in New York, and it was the whole C-suite. And their initial reaction to the whole pitch was, we just aren't willing to take Bitcoin risk. And I almost wanted to collapse because I just had spent a whole hour explaining to them how permission blockchain is not Bitcoin, but that was the mindset at the time. Fast forward to now, where I would say we've probably spoken to 3/4, if not 80% of every airline in the world at this point. All of them, no exception, all of them understand and agree that the future of the loyalty and rewards industry will be on blockchain. And it's an incredible transition to see, and it's very refreshing to see that they now understand why there's a value proposition for them and how blockchain works. And the benefit, obviously that's a huge benefit for us now that we're announcing our first customer in production, Emirates, but then they'll now look down that path and look at the public chains in a better light now as well, now that they see the inherent value that blockchain can add to them.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed that shift as well. I was invited by, I think it was 2014, I was invited to a roadshow by Jefferies Investment Bank, and they asked me to sit down with all of their fund managers, and Bitcoin was a really, really dirty word. Now, fast forward, I think it was 28, as things started to change, a lot of these fund managers were contacting me and asking these different types of questions. But what was really interesting was around about 2018, after the ICO bubble, and the fact that a lot of these, the custody solutions started coming out from major players like Fidelity. And when you speak to someone at Fidelity and you talk about the industry, they're like, well, we're really, it took us years to get comfortable with Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's kind of the gold standard. We couldn't touch Ethereum, that's too risky. Or I couldn't touch any of these things. And Bitcoin's kind of become like this very, reputable thing that is the complete opposite of what it was in before. So it's really interesting that. So tell me, let's relate this back to Loyyal and loyalty. So share with us how the vision has probably changed. We were having a quick discussion before we actually started when we were catching up. I imagine that the original vision was this ability to tokenize loyalty and give people the ability to trade them. Yeah. And then you were an investor in the Ethereum pre-sale, and you saw like Ethereum come around, and then obviously tokenization became a really big thing in 16, 17. And there was all the movements from public blockchains to private blockchains. Share with us, walk us through the timeline, the original thing that you thought blockchain or Bitcoin or crypto could bring to loyalty, and the journey and where it is today in terms of how corporations and companies like Emirates Airlines are going to actually be using this and launching things in production.
For sure, yeah. So I bought my first Bitcoin in early 2013, and I can't remember, it was like $20 or something like that. It's amazing how far it's come since then. And then, like you said, I was at the conference in Miami, I think, when Vitalik announced the pre-sale, and he was just swarmed by people afterwards. It's such a new development. People were all excited about it. But I think it was around towards the end of 2013 when I wanted to do more than just hold crypto. I was anxious to be actively involved and help promote it in some way than just be an investor. I didn't want to get involved in things related to finance or banking because I had enough of that in my life. I'll do something a little more fun, a lot less dreary. And so that's when like I said, I found this use case, and I didn't have any loyalty experience, and I'm not a highly technical person. So it was a very naive jump. I'm glad I did it in retrospect. It's been really challenging, and we've had great success. But when I initially got into this idea, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could exchange my loyalty points? If I could take my Delta miles and trade them for Marriott rewards on some type of exchange, and that'd be a lot easier if they're tokenized, clearly. And that's how I got into this idea, just like every other Bitcoin or blockchain startup that gets involved in this idea. Well, that doesn't have loyalty industry experience, but once you start talking to program operators, you'll find that is actually the last thing in the world that they'll ever want to do. It's not the lack of ability, it's more related to accounting issues. And I'm a former CPA, so I understood this very quickly. Just for the listeners, brief basics on loyalty program accounting. when you receive a loyalty point from some merchant or an airline, that is on their part, basically an IOU. It's like a promise to give you some service in the future upon redemption. And to offset that giving of a service while receiving no cash in return, they have to defer part of the original sale as a liability. And then that is reversed as revenue when you come back and redeem your rewards. That's how loyalty program accounting works. And so when they defer that liability, they actually don't defer the entire thing. There's an industry term called breakage. Well, breakage is just a fancy word for points we think will never be redeemed. So they're looking at behavior over time in the industry. Around 30 to 15% of rewards are never redeemed for some reason. Under accounting standards, they're allowed to not report that on their balance sheet. So the liability they report is not actually the whole liability that they're on the hook for. And effectively, they're lying on their financial statements. It's quite amazing to know this exists. If you think about a large program like American Express, their membership rewards probably has $5-6 billion of program liability on their balance sheet. I don't know what their breakage is, but let's assume that they're better than most and it's 10%. 10% of $5 billion is $500 million. So they're understating their actual liability in that scenario by $500 million. So imagine if the redemption behavior changed in some way, such as increasing liquidity in the points where it gets in the hands of people who want to spend it. Now that increased liquidity is going to increase redemption. They'll have to reverse or increase that liability that they never reported, and that goes straight to the bottom line on the P&L. It's a nightmare scenario. So that's why they will never, at least we have solutions for that now. Without blockchain, they're not going to allow exchange of points. Without the solutions we've created with smart contracts, they're not going to allow exchange of points. So we were faced with an obstacle here. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? That's what I thought.
I mean, everyone, plus, I don't think people want people to spend their money in their thing. And there's probably this competitive thing where we don't want to spend it, or are they willing to swap?
Well, they will be, and if we have time, I'll get into some of the reasons why we allow that. And they do want to do it with us. So then we had to think about, okay, let's look at the broader picture here. What are things that they benefit from besides the customer having the opportunity to exchange their points? So this is a good transition into what we did with Emirates Airlines. So we started working with Emirates Airlines in 2016, and I'm so fortunate that they had the vision before anyone else to see the potential for their Skyward Miles program. So early on, it's just been so amazing working with them. Fantastic innovation team and a great airline, but they're very conservative about what they say to the public, in that they only allow us to talk about vendors that are in production contracted relationships to publicly talk about the work they're doing with them. So for 3 years, we've been doing, as you know, you've been getting the investor updates. We've been doing this exciting work with Emirates Airlines. We can't tell anybody. You know, as a startup, to have that asset and not be able to share it was really challenging. But what we found with them, not only in 3 years of working with them, having developed, I would say without a doubt, clearly the global lead and understanding of technology for the loyalty rewards industry. And we've patented some of that along the way. So that's been a huge benefit for us. But additionally, doing the pilot with them and proving with empirical evidence the value that's not about exchange. So if I can get into that pilot, last year, Emirates did a live pilot on the Loyyal product suite with a local rideshare service. I'm not permission to say the name, but it's something similar to Uber. And the objective was to see how much can we reduce partner operating costs and how much can we improve the visibility into transactions. So the current industry standard is the airline or the company has a big old database, and nobody has right access to it for obvious reasons. But they want your points. They want you to spend points at partners to increase liquidity and to increase the usage of their brand outside of just direct transactions. In the case of Emirates, they have over 120 partners, and bigger airlines would have hundreds of partners where you can earn or spend your points at a third party, like a hotel or a car rental. So currently the way the system works in this industry is if I ride in that rideshare program and I pay with my Skyward miles, that partner will then just accumulate that inventory on their side until the end of the month. Emirates has no visibility at all into these transactions. And at the end of the month, then that partner then would key in their transactions to something like an Excel sheet, and then they'll upload that into some cloud like Dropbox or something. And then someone at Emirates is going to download that, and then they're going to key it in, and they'll reconcile the balances. And when the balances match, an invoice will be generated, and then Emirates will pay them fiat currency for those Skyward miles that they had received. That's the current process. It's quite cumbersome, and that's the industry standard. The pilot with Loyyal, the way that worked is now I get in this rideshare service and I pay with my Skyward miles. The payment method is from my wallet that I own is transferred to the wallet that the rideshare driver owns. That is broadcast through the distributed environment, and that is the reconciliation. So it's done. The invoice is automatically generated. We don't offer fiat settlement on our chain for monetary regulatory reasons, but we can offer it through a third-party chains, such as vendors on, like Ripple or Stellar or something like that. But up until that invoice generation, everything I mentioned before is replaced. It's eliminated. And they found that that partner cost was reduced by 80%, 80. It was bigger than we had expected. It's significant when you think that most of their transactions are through partners. And that was so compelling that they then decided to go into production rollout of us. That ended end of last year. That, although it's still ongoing in production with that one partner. And so that was a compelling benefit that we have now empirical evidence towards to show that now a program operator, because they can reduce the partner operating costs by, in that case, it was 80%. It'll probably fluctuate a little bit. Think about all the partners that they couldn't work with before because they didn't break even. Now that's going to expand dramatically. You get increased transaction volume, which is going to grow the top line of the program. Revenues will be driven up. At the same time, you have an expansion of the profit margins too. So you're in this really great financial environment of margin expansion, at the same time getting top line growth in an industry that typically doesn't have a lot of growth, let alone any margin expansion. And so that is the immediate impact that the program operators can see with Loyyal now that we've done that pilot in the market, and we have the numbers to show that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that come from that. Obviously, when you start, it's a really interesting industry because it's designed for exactly what it says, trying to get loyalty and customers, reward customers. But then all of a sudden, it becomes a bit of a financial transaction and then starts to look like accidentally almost some kind of money service operator or something. And you don't want to get the wrong side of that because then it ruins the original use case and it was never designed for that. It's a bit like the market finds really innovative solutions. So there's services like there's a whole market for people using Amazon reward points because communities like freelancers in India, they start using Amazon points as a currency almost, and suddenly this unintended consequence emerges, and it might suddenly become regulated in a way that completely prohibits or is against the interest of the original use case. So what are some of the interesting things you see there? And does stable coins play an interesting role in trying to bridge some of those challenges that corporations might be having?
Yeah, no, that's a very insightful question because the reason why us as consumers are frustrated with all of the loyalty programs is they've come to be run as basically a private central bank that's a cash generator for the company. That breakage is pure profit for the company. It brings in cash for the company. And they've come to rely more on that breakage than actually care about the brand itself. When you think about it, targeting a certain percentage to not be spent is the same thing as saying targeting a certain percentage of people to not value your product or your brand. It's kind of insanity, really. And so kind of morphed into become run as financial products. Now that we are able to help transition out of, like I said, with allowing them to keep that breakage. But before I get into that, I want to touch upon, you mentioned that some people are using points for unintended reasons. Fraud is a really big problem in this industry. We don't really talk about it as one of our main talking points because we already have enough that are really compelling. But when you go to a blockchain environment like us, which is a private permission environment, not a public chain, this is one of the reasons why they'd much rather get started on public chains is everybody is identified on this environment. When you think about someone like Emirates, they have a node on our chain and they don't have to replace their existing database. That database can actually just communicate via API with their node. Ideally, they do migrate out of that, but they can still share the benefits by just having a node. So they have a node. Every wallet that can receive Skyward Miles has to be issued from their node and only from their node. So a wallet issued from another program's node or any other node on our platform cannot receive Skyward Miles tokens. So that is an inherent protection against it not going to a wallet that you don't understand. And by having that structure, you can imagine someone at Emirates sitting at like a central command center in Dubai, and they can see every wallet that's been issued, and they know the name of every person it's been issued to. And if they see any behavior that looks suspicious, it's real time. Like now they're blind to it. It's quite a common problem for nefarious people to accumulate large points in a program. But here they can see, is there a pool accumulating somewhere? Does this behavior look suspicious? And they know exactly who it was, and it's real time. So it eliminates that risk of it being used for a reason other than the brand intended. And it's important because it is their brand. It's the most valuable asset that they have. And so that is eliminated by having it on a private permission environment where you can control where the loyalty points are going. I want to go back to the problem of breakage because this is a really key solution we offer to these programs. My mission now that I'm somewhat of a self-taught expert in the loyalty industry, and I find it incredibly exciting, education in behavioral economics and finance and how it all comes together, is to get the programs back to their original intention, making us loyal because those programs enrich our lives, as opposed to now we don't know how to use the points. It just frustrates our lives. And so we got to get rid of breakage in the industry. That's a key objective. So when you have a smart contract layer, you can do some cool things with that, obviously. And one is, let's say I have 1 million Skyward Miles and I want to give them to you, Simon, because you've been such a great friend for the last 4 or 5 years or so. I can't give them to you now without paying a huge fee. And that fee could be upwards of 80%, believe it or not, if you do it on something like points.com. One is that breakage percentage has to be protected by the increased liquidity. And two, it's terribly expensive to record that transfer from me to you. If we move on to Loyyal, what we can do is we can allow for free exchange, 100% free exchange. By putting into a smart contract, we would say something like, okay, Greg, if you transfer 1 million miles from your wallet to Simon's wallet, 800,000 miles will arrive in his wallet. And it's a 20% haircut, but maybe I'm like, well, 20% is not that bad versus 80% somewhere else, or not being able to do it at all. But some people will do that. And that percentage can be written into the smart contract, whatever they want it to be. Maybe it's their breakage, maybe it's breakage plus a little bit of a transaction fee, whatever. And now you can allow for free exchange between all of your members because you protected that breakage portion. And now you value those points better as a user because you have greater use of them, greater liquidity of them. And that is one mechanism. There's a few others that are a bit more complex into accounting that allows us to let them transition out of breakage and move more towards the third use of Loyyal, which we really talk about a lot, and that is the customer benefit, right? Making the customer experience better and giving the customer incentives that are aligned with their personal values.
Yeah. I mean, just as someone that knows nothing about the industry other than what, having hung around with you and just being a customer, really, over the years, I've racked up so many air miles, but I've got no idea where they are, how to access them. maybe this already exists and I got no idea about it, but I'm hoping that one day I just log in, I've got some kind of wallet, and it figures out the entire history of all these things that I've done. But literally, I feel like, well, I know I am. I'm missing out of hundreds of thousands of value because I just got no idea about how to claim these things or what I'm actually doing.
Yeah, now that should become a lot easier when it's easier for the program to let you spend it. So ideally, we'll get to some point where you could open up to one wallet and you can access a number of different loyalty point balances in one place. Or if, say, you've got 2 million United miles, when it's easier for United to let you spend in other places, but more importantly, by using smart contracts and easier access to the data, which is now on a blockchain, you can get highly customized incentives according to what you do, not just everybody getting the same blast email once a week. So for example, let's say, you said you started mountain biking recently. And so let's say you're a mountain biker and you're walking through a mall and there's a bicycle shop that maybe has some mountain bike accessories that perhaps you could use. Well, if that data is now accessible on chain, that incentive can be issued to you real time because the data is accessible from within the wallet. And then now that reward as a smart contract can say, oh, there's a bicycle shop up there. It has a water bottle cage that maybe Simon needs for his bike. And you can get a real-time prompt that says, hey, look, we know that you're a mountain biker and maybe you could use this, and United wants to help you in your personal hobbies. So let's give you 2x redemption value of your miles to go get something at that store that you need. And that's capable because of the smart contracts and because of the easier access to the data. And effectively what you're getting now is, when you're a one percenter and you've got this VIP access to personalized service, that now can be shared across the tail of all the rest of us. Because the person that did it before, that's checking all that data about what you like to do and is familiar with you, that's now encoded in a smart contract that's then deployed across this blockchain. It's secured by the blockchain, so we know nobody's going to go in and change it. And it's like a little personal concierge for all of us. It never sleeps, it never gets tired, it never gives us the wrong information. It's always there to give us personalized service according to our needs and our lifestyle. And that will transform these programs from what you just said is, I have no idea how to use these miles, to you're walking around and it knows what you value, and maybe it gets you to spend it in a way that you didn't even know would have increased the value of your life experience. And can you imagine how much more loyal you would be to a program like that, that's guiding you towards things that will make your life better according to the things you've done in the past? It's completely different relationship between us and these programs, and Loyyal would make that possible. So I'm very excited to get to that part. That will probably be in the next year or two, because unfortunately right now they're very finance focused. The only thing they really care about is, oh wow, 80% cost savings, revenue growth, and margin expansion. The customer part will come a little bit later, but by getting it in through that, then I would say probably in 2 or 3 years, we'll start seeing some of this real incredible and exciting innovation coming that affects us as users of these programs.
Yeah. So before we open up questions to the audience and Irvin starts to pull together some of the live questions I might be having in the live chat, I have a few more questions. And one of the things over the years, having been, someone on the other side of having invested in your deal, there are some of our companies that are just incredibly bad at investor relations. It frustrates a lot of our investors, and it's a very frustrating thing. But I also know on the other side, having been a founder of a company at BnkToTheFuture, I know how incredibly time-starved it is actually just trying to make progress. But one of the things I've been most impressed about with you and your team is just this incredible Rolodex of just the biggest names in the world that you're constantly working with, constantly managing those leads. And, even the Emirates deal, years of work and hard work to actually, get this through and pass the finish line. What's your secret? How do you get into these ginormously large brands? Where do you start?
Well, thanks for the kind words. Actually, I feel like my investor relations is not sufficient, but it's good to hear positive feedback. I think it's extremely important to stay connected with people that fund what you're doing, at minimum on a quarterly basis. But like you said, because we're working with these huge companies, usually under NDA, most of what I send to you just gets chopped out of there before we can share it with the public. We're in a very great position because within the industry, people know that we're working with Emirates. I mean, I can't put it in writing, or I wouldn't be able to say it in public, but they talk. It's an industry. And so it was known basically amongst the insiders that we had been doing this work with Emirates, and they come to us. We don't have any marketing team. We do very little external promotion. And one of the reasons why is nobody does what we do. A few have tried, but it's a tough nut to crack. And I would say that almost all of these huge names that you've seen, the major hotels, the major airlines, the major banks, they've come to us, believe it or not, through our contact page. And it's exciting because they see that we might add value. It's frustrating because we're too small to be able to onboard all these customers that we want to right now, which is why we're doing this raise right now. So very fortunate in the fact that we're the only ones that do this. We're the only ones that have a live product on the market. We have a robust portfolio of patents. And many of them have come to us, and we've built a rapport with them. On the flip side, like you said, terribly frustrating to not be able to talk about it in public. People have come to me last year and said, "Hey, are you still doing that Loyyal thing, or did you guys go out of business?" I'm like, no, we haven't gone out of business. But it's been a long, difficult, bite your tongue period when you're doing such exciting things, but we can only selectively talk about it. And that's why I'm so excited now. Basically, I feel like my life is content for the first time in 3 years, because I can tell the world, yes, we had done a successful pilot with Emirates Airlines. Yes, they are in production use with the Loyyal product suite. Yes, they plan to roll it out to all 25 million Skyward Miles members by the end of the year. And it is on. So that's great that I just was able to say that to you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it must be incredibly frustrating. I think the first time we met face to face, I think it was it's incredible today how you can just build these online relationships with people, think you know someone, and then you meet them face to face, and it's like, well, I kind of knew you all along. But when we first met was in, I think it was the Burj Al Arab, this incredible 7-star hotel in Dubai. Everyone, you must have seen it, the cell-looking building. And really, Dubai was, really going through this smart city, and they really took the blockchain thing on, head on, and made a real big splash around that. And it seemed like you were just in the center of everything to do with, what was happening in UAE and these regions. What came of that? I guess one of the other frustrating things is that, to be in a position whereby all of these companies want to do business with you, but just taking on one customer must be like an incredible amount of work, and you have to be ultra selective because building these programs, you can't do it for all of them, otherwise you're at risk of not delivering for anyone. So perhaps how did you select these ones? What is UAE up to, and what is it like being in a position where you're not quite big enough yet to take on all these customers that want to do business with you?
Yeah, no, that's the most frustrating thing in my life, is knowing how much demand is literally knocking on our door. But when like you said, there's only 24 hours a day, and you're a startup and you never have enough capital to not be able to actually go in and get those ideas. You have to be selective for sure, which is basically why we've focused almost entirely on Emirates over the last 3 years, because we only need to prove one success, and we wanted to make sure that we gave it the proper attention that it needed. Interesting backstory of how we got involved in Dubai. I'm going to give a shout out to Bruce Fenton, who I know you know well. Bruce, it was I think 2013. We were talking about, we wanted to do a Bitcoin conference, but every major city had already done one. And then Bruce said, I think Dubai hasn't done a Bitcoin conference yet. I've done some work there. I've lived there. Let's run our own Dubai conference. So we ended up doing the first Dubai Bitcoin conference, December of 2014. And it was a pretty decent turnout. It was about 100. We had hoped for more, but you can imagine the environment at the time, and there had never been a Bitcoin conference there before. That that conference ended up leading to the development of the Dubai Global Blockchain Council under the Prime Minister's office. And so I was brought in as a member of that because I helped set up that conference. And that's how I met the innovation guys at Emirates Airlines. And that's how we got involved with the Dubai Futures Accelerators program, which we were in the first and second cohort. Fantastic program, again, run by the Prime Minister's office. They have an incredibly exciting blockchain vision. I think, as most people, including myself, when you get super excited, you're overly enthusiastic about how quickly it can be implemented. So, I mean, I'm not privy to timelines that they've announced, but I know that there's no change in their belief and in their desire to roll out things on blockchain. But at that particular conference you're talking about, we were promoting the Dubai Points program, which is something that Dubai Holdings sponsored for us when we were in the Dubai Futures Accelerators program. And it was a very cool tourism incentivization program where basically you would land in Dubai and you would get a tourist app that would be issued by Dubai Tourism or some other entity. And it would incentivize you to go to different locations, and you could earn or spend these Dubai points. And their objective was to increase the benefit or the experience of tourism in Dubai, and then hopefully increase Dubai tourism. We did a very short live pilot of that, and it was successful. And that's what that presentation was about. And frustratingly enough, I wasn't able to mention Emirates Airlines on stage in that hotel. But that's been shelved for now for the reason, like you said, we're a small startup. When you do an MVP, you don't need to do 6 things right. You just need to do one thing right. Once you get the one thing right, then you can expand out another thing. So Dubai Points has been put on the shelf for now to focus mainly on Emirates Airlines. But my investors are almost entirely throughout the Middle East because of the work we've done with the Dubai government and Emirates Airlines. Our seed lead investor is a company called Hayat Group, which has been a really great supporter of ours. It's Dubai-based. They've invested 3 times throughout the life of the company. Our A lead investor is a Saudi company called iNet, also on our board, also very supportive of us, and a number of other individual investors throughout the region. Also, UAE Exchange is one of our investors. A really innovative innovation group called Womena, also in Dubai in the Middle East, is one of our investors. So we have a strong concentration of investors in the region. And I can tell you that I expect that the Middle East will emerge as one of the fastest early adopters of blockchain because one, they're higher risk takers. 2, they're looking to diversify out of traditional investments like real estate and energy. They understand the virtues of blockchain. So I think we'll see in the coming years, as these industries grow, the Middle East, along with Asia, probably, in my opinion, will be the leading regions of adoption.
Interesting. So I guess there's I lead to my final question before we take some from the audience. I guess so the goal from here is really focus on delivering, a great product for one customer. The fact that you've executed and secured what you did, that led to the Series B. And then I imagine that your goal after that is to be able to do that for a lot more people, pull in a lot more money, and just really be able to build something that can take advantage of all these relationships you built over the years. Is that an accurate kind of goal from that?
Absolutely, yeah. So when we have Emirates now that they're in production, and it's really key for us to help them rapidly onboard their partners. You need the counterparty for the transaction. So a big part of what we've developed to date is a scalable, modular process that helps them basically point and click, send to their partners, and onboard their partners like the rideshare service or whoever else it may be. The plan now for next year, the way we roll out our sales cycle is we do quarterly in each region. We do what we call like a workshop where we'll sit down and talk about what would be a good POC or a pilot with them, whenever. And then we go into the pilot and then production. Our plan for the next year is to do somewhere between, like I said, conservatively, 5 to 10 new program operators into production by the end of the next year. And by expanding out by that much in select industries, we're going to see an incredibly robust environment of program to program interaction. And one of the things I didn't mention before is You can have multi-branded programs on a blockchain token because neither brand has to trust the other one to secure the value. So now you can have an airline hotel point that it exists as both simultaneously. You don't have to exchange from one to the other. It's incredibly innovative. And you'll see this incredibly robust environment with just 5 to 10 additional programs beyond Emirates. That's our plan throughout the next year. Beyond that, it's going, I don't want to think about it because it could be so incredibly aggressive in how quickly we could grow from that point. So we're doing this raise now to hire the people that we need. Our product is incredibly strong. It's robust. We're able to do a minimum of 8,000 transactions per second continuous, which is enough to get us to through the end of next year. We could get that much higher. I don't want to get in numbers there right now. The salespeople basically is what we need. Salespeople, customer success people. The technology is there, which is incredibly rewarding for me to say that the technology is there. We've spent 4 years building it. Emirates approved it for everything that they need. And now we need to be able to onboard these customers that are knocking on our door. So regional salespeople, regional customer success people, roaming customer success people to embed within the program to hold their hand through this process. That's the next phase over the next year that we plan to do. And obviously marketing. So I can go out and talk about some of these great brands that we work with.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to invite Irvin now to see if we've got any questions from the live chat or from the different networks. Irvin, have you got anything to ask for Greg?
Yep. We got 2 questions from the community. So, okay, the first question is, the community is excited to know, how does Loyyal make money from this?
Very important question. Yes. So we make money primarily on a transaction fee basis. The way we're structured is we have 3, soon potentially 4 tiers of customers. So obviously tier 1 through tier 4, and that is segmented based on the number of transactions that program would do per year. There is a monthly network access fee, which can range between 5,000 up to upwards of an undefined number for the very large programs. It's a per month access fee. For us, it's a small amount, basically to cover the operating costs of a node and whatnot. The bulk of our revenue over the next few years will come from the transaction fees. So I use my Skyward Miles for the rideshare program. There's multiple transactions actually involved in that one exchange, and we charge a small fee based upon that transaction. That will be the bulk of our revenue, and that's for the next few years. We expect once we get past year 3, 4, or 5 or so, royalties may become a large part of what we do when competitors begin to enter this industry and they start to grow in regions where we have IP patent protection. We expect to be able to collect royalties off of that as well, which is again a hedge against competition coming in. But for the near term, that probably investors care about the next 1 to 3 years, the large bulk of that is going to come from transaction volume. So the more transaction volume we get, the more revenue that we'll make.
Okay. All right. So the second question, if this program increases redemption of points, then why would the company want to use this and increase their expense?
Well, that's an interesting question. So it actually reduces the expense when they're on the Loyyal product suite versus the current architecture. Like I mentioned with the Emirates pilot, they showed in that pilot that they reduced the cost of transacting with a partner by 80%, significantly lower. Increased transactions don't necessarily increase cost when you look at that reduced per transaction cost. In addition, when you have increased transactions with partners, as the airline or as the program operator, I negotiate a price with that partner that I will buy back my mile or reward from them at. And that's negotiated individually with each partner. So if I have more partners I can transact with that are at a break even or above level, those partners are probably smaller. They're not the big hotels or whoever it may be, which gives me greater bargaining power. They want access to be able to use my brand as a global airline. It's basically a marketing tool for the partner to bring in transactions. And so I'm in a more favorable leveraged position in those negotiations with those smaller partners we've now onboarded. I can probably negotiate a more favorable buyback price for me, which means not only now do I have more transactions, but that transaction is more profitable for me because I'm buying back my mile at a lower price than I would have with my bellwether core partners that do the bulk of my transactions.
Cool. All right. Next one we have. So basically, Loyyal is a tech company building blockchain solutions for loyalty programs, or Loyyal is a loyalty solutions for themselves.
So what Loyyal is we're just the infrastructure of the network. So ideally, no customer even knows we exist. We're like the difference between your carrier being on 4G or 5G. We provide one blockchain environment that is a component of our Loyyal product suite, and every program operator that we work with operates a node on that Loyyal product suite on that one blockchain. So we provide that Loyyal product suite for program operators to operate their program on. We don't have any loyalty program we do ourselves. We're not involved at all in the operation of loyalty programs, and we'll never have our own. Right now, because we're small, we do give some professional services, strategic consultation, but as we start to grow, that will not become a part of our business. And actually, I didn't mention professional services is a small part of our revenue now, but that will fade away as we grow. We want to just be that infrastructure provider for the program operators.
And it feels like a winner takes all industry if you can crack it.
Well, that's actually true. When you think about how sticky this could be, if I'm Emirates Airlines and I've onboarded 100 of my 120 partners to this one platform, what kind of, and it took 3 years, what kind of endeavor would it be to go to competitor X that comes up next year? Very, very, very difficult to do. It's like, imagine switching, a new internet's made and you're like, I'm going to be on that internet. Everybody has to go with you. And so the first mover advantage is incredibly valuable. So we get 1 or 2 or 3 programs on here. Not only is it very, very sticky, they'll probably be on it for as long as I can imagine, but that means others want to get on board your program or your network because they know that how sticky it is for the others that are already there. First mover advantage is critical. Luckily for us, that as far as I'm aware of, there are really no other viable competitors that are near the level where we are. I would expect now that the word is getting out by the end of the year, we will have viable competitors, and I actually want at least one to make it a market to show that there's actually a reason to do it. But from now to then is a really critical time for us to aggressively get out there and bring on as many programs as we can before competition becomes another variable.
Okay. So I think this is the last question. Loyyal's focused a bit on securing patents on the technology around the globe. How do you see those patents adding value to Loyyal in the near term and in the long term?
Sorry, Arby, can you repeat that again?
Sure. Okay, so the question is, how do you see those patents adding value to Loyyal in the near term and in the long term, as Loyyal is a bit focused securing patents around the globe?
Yeah, no, that's extremely critical for us. Early on in the company, I think it was July 2014, I filed our original patent application in the US for the use of distributed ledger to incentivize transactional or non-transactional behavior. So basically any action. The only prior art was mining on a public chain and a proof of work consensus algorithm. Everything else had not existed yet. And I took tremendous backlash from my friends at the time. It was a really anti-establishment community. But business, we need these for defensive purposes. When we start going up against these gigantic corporations around the world, we'll get squashed like a bug if we don't have something to protect us. This is protection. So the benefit of filing that so early with the July 2014 filing date is we've been able to subsequently file that in numerous countries around the world with the same priority date. And so by putting that in the US first, we've had that same set of claims approved in Japan, It's been approved in Singapore. It's been approved in Korea, and it's pending in a number of other regions like the EU, UAE, Australia, and the US, and also South America. When the rest of those start to get approved, or even with the ones that we have, so for example, we can go into the Japan market aggressively, and Rakuten, who is the Amazon equivalent in Japan, basically everybody in Japan has a Rakuten account. If they decide to compete with us, we have a defensive advantage against them, so we can grow to become a viable competitor to them, with something that protects us in the early years that otherwise, we just will get stomped on by someone like that. In addition to having the defensive protection, it can become a source of revenue for us by charging competitors in regions where we have patent protection some royalty fee for using our IP. Not necessarily something I want to make a large part of our revenue, because I like competition, and I think competition is good for development of the industry. And I have confidence that our product will always be superior to the others. But it's something that will help to fuel our growth early on. But I want to emphasize to the listeners that that's not something that we want to become a major part of the revenue source at any point in time. It's mainly for defensive purposes while we get our feet on the ground and established.
Awesome. Okay, so we've hit the 1 hour mark, so that's going to do it for this episode. You've successfully managed to get me excited about loyalty schemes again. So the pitch is live on BnkToTheFuture right now. Greg can always jump into the investor zone if you've got more questions that follow. For those that are watching the recording, if you're a qualifying investor, then head over to the investor zone on the pitch on BnkToTheFuture.com. And my final thoughts, I guess, is that I hope that this is a bit of a gateway drug for and a new use case for eventually people using crypto, because it just seems like a perfect synergy. Once these ginormous corporations get their loyalty schemes on blockchain, it seems to me like a no-brainer in the future that it could return to the original vision, that people use Bitcoin and public blockchains in order to actually transact in these loyalty schemes. And we get this amazing market that pushes public blockchain and crypto adoption in the end. So I know that you are a crypto guy at your roots. You've moved into this corporate industry because of where the market has gone and what you're doing. But I hope we get to see that in the end.
I hope so too. That is my personal long-term objective. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so that's going to do it for this episode of Bank to the Future Live. Thank you, Greg Simon, for a great interview. And if you've got any questions, please do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We go live each and every week. If you hit that subscribe button and the bell symbol, YouTube will notify you every single time we go live. And remember to grab us on Twitter or Facebook, and we'll try and follow up. Leave comments in the channel, and we'll try and follow up with those. And also remember to not miss any deals. To become a priority access member, you've got to hold 10,000 Bank to the Future tokens either on your Bank to the Future wallet, or you can put them directly on the Bank to the Future platform, and you'll get 48 hours notice. And deals that own sometimes, we have lots of deals and the market always changes depending on what crypto is doing. But often deals never go live because they're completely sold out in the priority access stage. So remember to get your account upgraded so that you can get access to these deals before everybody else. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you this time next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.